Well, folks, it has certainly been an interesting week here in DC. Our emails have been absolutely flooded with questions from the federal community about OPM's recent email regarding the Deferred Resignation Program, or fork in the road. People have lots of questions about what this might look like for their financial futures and how they should be responding. I know that with only a week to respond, people are feeling pressure and a certain level of anxiety about what this might mean for them and their families as they move forward. I've been having conversations with federal employees and attorneys all week, and so I'm going to talk about what we know about OPM's emails so far and some really important financial questions that you want to be asking yourself between now and the end of the year. And I'll also cover what you can be doing in your financial plan right now to help you get ahead of any potential surprises. So I think at this point, everyone is pretty familiar with what the email is and what is encompassed. So I'm going to focus less on that and more about the details that are a little more ambiguous and how to be thinking about them. And first, I just want to debunk the myth and maybe reduce some of your stress that your benefits are just going to be completely stripped from you. That's just not the case. The fact is, you are not going to lose any of the benefits that you're already vested in. So things like your TSP contributions or the years of creditable service you've already paid into the system. These are benefits that will remain with you whether you get laid off, resign, or retire. The only real way to lose these kinds of benefits is by an act of treason. However, you should not assume that you will get to keep the full amount of benefits that you currently have today. A key question you should ask yourself is, are you currently eligible for an immediate and unreduced pension? Some of your benefits, like FEHB or health insurance, are contingent upon this detail. And others, like making sure you don't get a reduced pension, are also contingent on a certain fact pattern. Now, in most cases, this is going to mean that you are at least of minimum retirement age and have a certain number of years of service, one separating. As far as we know, this is not currently set up as a buyout or any kind of VERA visa, which in those circumstances would obviously have slightly different rules. However, this doesn't mean that VERAs won't be approved in the near future. So this is concerning for anyone who is a little younger and maybe potentially leaving service prior to a certain age. And so you're going to want to consider how this might impact your benefits, things like health insurance, if you no longer have this job. By accepting the resignation, you are effectively removing yourself from federal service. So you should understand how this has an impact on your eligibility for retirement. If you are already eligible to retire, either under an immediate retirement or deferred or postponed, then obviously you still have those choices. However, the FAQ section on OPM's website was very clear that if you are turning eligible after September 30th, 2025, then your case is going to be one of the ones that they're going to look at on an individual basis. So this is something to be aware of, and it's not clear whether you will qualify for a waiver or not. On the other hand, there was also language that said there was no real guarantee that any agency or position is still going to be remaining in place after these changes take place. In other words, there's not a zero chance that your job won't be eliminated, and of course that can also have an impact on your retirement. Now, I've spent the week talking to reporters and other professionals, as well as several employment attorneys on both sides of the aisle, mind you, to try and get a sense for what is the general consensus about this kind of resignation and the language that's built in the letter. Now, I'm going to share with you some of the concerns that I have heard from other professionals who are legal experts in this area. And really, the concern around this is that by agreeing to this letter, you could be waiving certain rights or protections that may be available to you as a federal employee. So here are some questions that we are asking our clients to consider as they're looking forward to their future. The first is, what exactly are the terms of what I am agreeing to? The second is, if there are any RIFs or reduction in force or any layoffs, then what does that mean if they start next month and I was part of the group that resigned? In other words, is it possible that those RIFs or layoffs could impact anyone who did actually resign? Third, if this does impact them, would this impact their ability to continue to earn an income through September, like the letter mentioned? And additionally, what kind of legal protection would there be for someone in this position? And then, of course, ultimately, the biggest question is it worth me just risking my job being cut altogether or agreeing to this new deal? Now, obviously, I am a financial planner and advisor to federal employees. I am not an employment attorney, so I do encourage you to do your own due diligence on this, but I at least wanted to share the information that we have been able to collect from a variety of sources so far. So obviously, with this degree of uncertainty, there's tons of questions that people have. And so next, I'm going to share with you how you can prepare financially for a situation like this or another similar situation that maybe you weren't planning for. And really, the biggest question here that feds need to ask is, what am I going to do if I suddenly no longer have an income? Cash flow is one of the most important parts of your financial safety. One of the ways that you can ensure that you keep cash flow going even without an income is with the use of a strong emergency fund or a cash or conservative bucket among your assets. Now, this conservative bucket, if you will, is one that you are considering using things like money markets, cash, very short-term investments, and fixed income instruments, all of which are considered to be very safe if you set them up correctly, so that if you need to draw on those buckets because you don't have an income in an emergency, it's going to be there to be able to take care of your family. In other words, really, it's your first line of defense against any kind of financial insecurity or financial uncertainty. Now, I'm going to share with you some guidelines that are in line with the CFP Board's financial planning recommendations. So first, we really want to look to understand how many incomes does a particular family have. So for example, if we take a single person with only one income, what we're looking to determine here is how many months of expenses, so all in, what does it cost to live that month? Mortgage, any other liabilities, eating, travel, etc. And we want to identify how many months of those expenses do we want to hold in that conservative bucket. So in general, as a rough guideline, someone who's single with a single income wants to consider something like 6 months, depending, it could be a little bit more, maybe 8 months of their monthly expenses in cash or in that conservative bucket. Now, if a single person has two incomes that are unrelated and pretty equal to each other, meaning if you lose one job, you still have the ability to have another income, this is where we go down to something like 3 or 4 months in terms of your expenses in that cash position. Now, for someone who is married but also only has one income, well, this is very similar to this one, right? In fact, might even be a little bit more because there are more people that are relying on that same income. So I would really be more comfortable with something like 8 months, although doctrinally, something like 6 months is acceptable as well. And again, same pattern here, married with 2 months, really we can go back to looking at 3 to 4 months of expenses in cash or in that conservative bucket. Now, caveat here, if both of these people are federal employees, or one is a Fed and the other is a federal contractor, this circumstance per se could potentially impact both of them. So we're not going to count that like two real incomes. We're going to pretend like that's really just one income because the loss of income could affect both people. So we want to err on the side of caution and have a little bit more cash in the situation like that. Now, these are some formal and academic recommendations, and I would really encourage you to think carefully about other parts of your life that might influence this. For example, do you have a particular skill set that might take you a little bit longer to land a next job if that is what you're going to do? Okay, if that's the case, maybe you have a really specialized skill and the interviewing process is longer, or just maybe there's less jobs around for that skill, then you might consider increasing that bucket a little bit bigger. Another is perhaps you had a lifestyle or a certain level of income that you've gotten used to, and maybe it'll just take you a little bit longer to find a job that kind of matches that same income. And this one's probably more common. If you know that you're going to potentially have some higher expenses coming up in the next several months, whether it's real estate taxes that are coming up, or maybe one of your kids will have tuition that they're going to be needing some support on that you've committed toward. That's something you're going to want to factor into this emergency plan as well. And of course, we can't forget, what if there is a medical emergency and you have a high deductible plan? That could sink a lot of the cash that you have in your emergency funds right now. So really, I want you to open your mind and think creatively about what are the different areas that could really draw upon that cash, and what if that coincides with my losing an income? Try to adjust your cash bucket accordingly. So what smart federal employees are going to do over the next week or so is they're going to sit with their families and really try to work out, what is our absolute minimum expense every single month? What are our wants versus our needs? How do we quantify that? And is there anywhere that we can potentially cut to start increasing our savings a little bit more? Now, to be clear, I don't mean savings in the TSP. I like to see that inside your actual checking account. And to be honest, this may be a little harder than it sounds. When you are late in your career and you just have maybe a large income or two large incomes, chances are you're just swiping that card. You're not really having to worry about the budget. There's sufficient income to take care of anything you want. So This maybe is something that you've fallen out of habit to do, but I encourage you, go back and think about this because it's also going to benefit you as you start planning your financial plan moving forward too. Now, another question I've been getting a lot over this last week is, Thiago, do we need to make any kind of portfolio allocations, especially if we're still working and we're potentially looking at a job loss here? This one's a little harder to answer because there's so much that goes into really creating an individualized investment plan that has so many different variables. But here's a few things that you can keep in mind as you think about your own portfolio moving forward. First, I want you to consider the impact that it might have on your financial safety and your wealth if, number one, you lose your income. Number two, you didn't have enough in that conservative bucket or in that emergency funds to take care of your needs. And number three, all of this happens at the same time that the market begins its nosedive. In other words, your portfolio's value is starting to decline rapidly because maybe this is the year that the next bear market comes around. To be clear, I'm not forecasting this because frankly, no one really knows, but it is a potential risk. And if you don't have an income, you don't have the emergency funds, how are you going to meet your needs other than by selling your investments on the way down, thereby making those losses permanent? This is one of the reasons that having a portfolio strategy that is well aligned with your specific plans and objectives is so critical, because we simply cannot count on the markets in the short term. The reality is that there's always some kind of uncertainty when we're looking right around the corner. So that's when we go back to the bucketed approach. This is a graphic that I know I've shared multiple times on this show before, but I think it does a really nice job of helping you to visualize how to be compartmentalizing your money. The longer that you have, the more tolerance to volatility you may potentially have as you invest your money. In other words, if you don't really need to touch your money over the next several years, that might be enough time to allow you the opportunity of regrow the money if you're invested properly. But again, that's only true if your short-term needs are being met. So you notice here, there is a bucket that is very, very conservative, one that is short-term, because this is the heartbeat of the retirement plan. If you are forced into an early retirement, either through a VERA or you decide you're going to resign, or you just don't have an income for a while and need to live on your portfolio almost like you were retired, then this short-term bucket is the heartbeat that keeps everything going. And finally, if you're in a really good place financially already, you feel like you already have all of these bases covered, I want to leave you with a couple of extra thoughts that I think are also very important. The first is, are you ready to actually leave work sooner than you had planned? Have you thought about how you're going to be spending your time? And sure, golf can be fun, but golfing all the time in retirement is not going to be as fulfilling as you think it is. So how are you going to be spending your time? Do you feel like you are emotionally ready to no longer be contributing to a mission? That's a big change for people, sometimes just feeling like the rug got ripped out from underneath them, and now they're having to hang their skills on a shelf. These are some interesting questions that I think go well beyond the money, but are still really important in helping you get the most out of your retirement and really feel like you've got that fulfillment. And sometimes life just throws curveballs at you. There's so many different things that come across your life and changes you didn't plan for throughout the course of your retirement. The truth is, as we start moving towards our ideal future, something in life might redirect us and we start heading in a different direction. And we have to do what we can to bring ourselves back on track so that we're still headed toward a future that we like. And before we know it, now there's something else that's come up. And this is what reality looks like. And we always want to be heading in the right direction towards that future that we want to design. You only get one shot at making retirement count and go successfully. So make sure you take the time to do your planning this year. And until next time, stay wise and stay wealthy.